Hello, and thank you for joining this introduction to Toolkits for Realtors to support property transactions. My name is Kristen Nason. I'm the acting chair of the Kootenay Lake Partnership and program coordinator with Living Lakes Canada, a nonprofit dedicated to help Canadians understand the connections between water, land use, climate change, biodiversity, and healthy human communities. So joining me today are Kristen Murphy with the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, Crystal Williams with the Regional District of Central Kootenay, Juliet Craig with the Kootenay Conservation Program, and Lori Carr with the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society. So I'll begin with a short story of the creation of the Kootenay Lake Partnership and a brief introduction to the Shoreline Guidance document. Kristen Murphy, one of the KLP partners, will walk us through some essential knowledge for waterfront property owners wanting to take on shoreline development projects. She'll also demonstrate how to find shoreline information for a given property. Following Kristen's introduction, Crystal, on behalf of the Regional District, another KLP partner, will provide you with a preview of their soon-to-be released new web map. Our third presenter is Juliet, who will demonstrate the Kootenay Conservation Program Stewardship Solutions Toolkit for landowners and land managers and help us find all this information in one place. And Lori Carr will wrap things up by showing resources that can be found by exploring the stewardship groups and some key information for property owners dealing with invasive species. So our story begins with several converging factors and opportunities. Fisheries and Oceans Canada completed a foreshore assessment along the west arm of Kootenay Lake in 2004 and again in 2008. They noted extensive impacts on the shoreline, including beach grooming, vegetation clearing, new retaining walls, and shoreline spawning habits disturbance, as well as over 300 new docks and groynes were built over that 4-year time frame. Many of these alterations had proceeded without appropriate permits and weren't in compliance with best management practices. At First Nations and our lakeside communities had raised concerns about cumulative impacts of shoreline development, and government agencies around the lake were observing policy conflicts and a lack of coordination and communications, and we're looking for opportunities to consider where there's synergies for overlapping responsibilities across government. So then there was formed the Kootenay Lake Partnership to support a productive and healthy ecosystem for Kootenay Lake that supports environmental, community, recreational, Aboriginal, and aesthetic values. We are funded by partners as well as local industry and granting agencies, and we're grateful to the Real Estate Foundation of BC for supporting this workshop. So our members are government agencies with jurisdiction on the lake and include local, regional, provincial, federal, and First Nation governments. In recent times, 4 nonprofits have joined in an advisory capacity. So the partnership began by looking beyond the west arm of the lake and completed a foreshore inventory for the entire lake. The methodology develops guidelines to improve understanding of the ecological values along the shoreline and directs development in a manner that protects high value and high risk areas. The KLP took a unique approach to the federal protocol by integrating archaeological and Tunaha cultural values. And overall, the Shoreline Guidance document is developed to clarify and streamline decision-making processes between agencies without introducing any new regulations, and just brings clarity and consistency for developers and for property owners. So our scope, the scope has extended beyond Kootenay Lake to include Slocan Lake and Brilliant Head Ponds in the West Kootenays. Our sister organization in the East Kootenays has conducted similar projects for several lakes around the East Kootenays. We do have a project coming up over the next few years to collect new data for between 6 and 8 lakes across the East and West Kootenays. And a website will be developed later this year to bring all of that information into one place to make it easy to access these resources. So in summary, all of this work accumulated in a shoreline guidance document. It includes mapping, activity risk tables, design and assessment standards, and decision-making flowcharts. Most of the information is pretty technical and high level, and it's used by our partners when reviewing applications or for management and planning purposes. Kristen Murphy is going to demonstrate how to get basic information from the document and lead you through some questions that arise by homeowners when selling and buying waterfront properties. So Kristen Murphy is a habitat biologist with the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. She's got a Bachelor of Science from the Thompson River University. She's worked as a land and water officer with the ministry for issuing water permits from 2004 to 2007, and has been working as a habitat biologist for the ministry since 2008, focusing on reviewing hydroelectric power plants, foreshore development, and major mine projects. She's been a participant with the Kootenay Lake Partnership since its inception. So thank you to Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the digital world. I'm just going to present a fair bit of information for you, and you can ask questions at the end. It's going to be pretty sort of high level, but I just thought I'd try and focus on things that people might be interested in selling property. So I'm going to kind of give an overview of Crown land applications and using the Shoreline guidance document. So we're going to start with who owns the foreshore. The Crown retains ownership of all water bodies identified under the term stream under the Water Sustainability Act. Now that's a very broad scope. So stream covers all lakes, streams, wetlands, marshes, ditches. Even if a stream is considered ephemeral, which means it doesn't have water in it all year, it might not even have water every year, it's still determined as a stream under the Water Sustainability Act. So when Crown land abuts private land, the delineation is the natural boundary. So that's where there's a break between the terrestrial and the aquatic vegetation and sort of substrate. And that's that break between the Crown land and the private land. So waterfront owners do have riparian rights to the waterfront that is the foreshore, the Crown land that is fronting their property. And that does allow them unimpeded access to the lakeshore fronting that property, and the ability to protect their private land. So what that means is that if somebody has a boathouse and they come and they want to build a permanent sort of buoy structure in front of those people's house, they can't do that. They have the right to have unimpeded access to that foreshore. And for protecting private land, that means that they can protect it from flooding. That doesn't mean that they can build, say, a retaining wall on Crown land. They can build something on their own property, but it does give them that ability to protect their private land. So the most common provincial legislation for use of the foreshore are the Provincial Land Act and the Provincial Water Sustainability Act, which issues approvals and tenures respectively. How does the province use the Shoreline guidance documents? Well, pretty much everybody, when reviewing those types of tenures, use the document ideally if available. So myself as a habitat biologist, I use it as a referral agency to determine some of the impacts of that potential application, and authorizations use it as well. It does not bind decision makers to follow. It is a guidance document. It is not a legislative piece or act, but it is a tool to be considered when reviewing applications. Additionally, if myself as a referral agency does use it as a tool to determine the impacts of that application, it has scientific validity to it, so it is a little bit difficult to ignore. I'm going to use an example, or here's an example sort of using the Shoreline guidance document and finding a specific property and kind of getting the information that's most useful for property owners. So as in this example, we're going to say that John Smith has a waterfront property owner and he wants to build a bunch of cabins in the back and offer boat slips to his clientele. So he's got a private dock, he's got a tenure for it, but he wants to build a commercial structure. So the first thing he's going to do is, you can kind of see the difference. He's already, on the picture on the left, you can see that there's already a bunch of structures. So the foreshore has already been impacted, but he wants to build a significantly different structure. So the first thing to do is in using the guidance document is to get to the guidance document. So the easiest way is to go to the Kootenay Lake Partnership website, where you can then click on the interactive map. I'm not going to have a live example just because of where we're at in the digital world, and I don't want us to get locked in a screen for the remainder of the presentation. So I've just grabbed screenshots of specific slides. So we're going to click on the interactive map, which is going to give you sort of an overview of Kootenay Lake. So every one of these squares is a sort of a map sheet or a segment. So the easiest way to actually find your way around this tool is to click on or to type in a specific address. But I'm just going to show you all the sort of overview tools that you have available. So you can click on anywhere on the lake and pull up all of this information. When the foreshore inventory mapping was done, we collected photos as well as all the ground information for the entire lake. And there was 11,000 photos taken during the FIM. And so there are pictures of every single property on Kootenay Lake that are available at that time, which was done in 2012. So as you zoom in, this is what you sort of start getting a screenshot of. You start zooming in and you start gleaning a lot more information about that segment of the foreshore. But at this point, it's still a lot of information. And really what you want to focus on is what's going on in front of that specific property. So you're going to zoom in again. And this is sort of where you start to get some really relevant information. So let's just say that John Smith is in this section. He's in segment 43. And the key lines to really focus your attention on are, I always find this a bit confusing because it's actually the skinny line adjacent to the foreshore. So as you can see, that's a yellow line. And if you go to the Aquatic Habitat Index and you look at the legend, it's rated as moderate. So it has a moderate rating value for the AHI. The other important lines to really focus on is sort of what if you're putting in an application, the First Nation enhanced engagement, yes or no, that you might need to be involved. For this one, it's a red archaeological zone, and so enhanced engagement is that sort of violet line. It is going to be required for any application. So those information are sort of the key points for somebody that wants to put in an application. However, if you really want to dig deep, there is so much information that's available through this tool and through the guidance document for any given location on the lake. So once we have that information, we have our AHI, we know it's yellow, we're going to go to the next two sort of the tools and the figures, the tables that look at what you might require to put in an application for your specific activity. So I've included all of the activities that we have to date, but there's always going to be outliers. There's going to be things that we never thought of. So I will say that this is not a complete list, but we did do our best to try and identify most of the key activities that happen on the lake. So you can see for each activity, it can identify what you may or may not need under provincial legislation. So whether you need a Crown land tenure, a Water Sustainability Act application, and potentially a federal fisheries review or approval. So what we're going to do here, and we want to keep in mind that our segment was yellow. So we've got our AHI ranking of moderate. And we want to go through the table and find our activity. So as you can see, I'm just going to scroll through really quick. There's a lot of different activities that have been identified. Some of them have much different impacts than others. So here we've got our commercial marina, and we want to upgrade to a new construction. So is a Crown land tenure required? Yes. Is the WSA sustainability approval or application required? Yes. Will something under the Fisheries Act be required? Most likely. So then, because it is a fairly significant development, there is another figure. I've included this figure because everything is all included in the shoreline guidance document for you. All the information is in there, and it's actually very easy to go through the document and find all the information as it's sort of succinctly put through the document. But this is going to look a little bit scary. So I'm not going to go through this figure, but I just wanted to show that it is directly associated with the guidance document. And really the key to this as an applicant or as somebody working on behalf of an applicant would be really to kind of go through what you want to do and then ideally contact Front Counter, who is very aware of this document. And then I thought I'd just give a little bit of information on sort of some key critical habitats around the lake that really do impact or will impact potential property owners where these types of habitats are associated. And that's because they're just so critical and they're quite rare along the lake. So kokanee shoal spawning, when kokanee populations have been a real issue for the lake over the last couple of years, we have operating alternatives for the protection of shoal spawning around the lake, and that's based on existing flexibility to the system that we've negotiated with the operators, which includes Fortis and BC Hydro, and the best available knowledge that we have for shoal spawning populations and when they require that water. So for Kootenay Lake, water levels are needed to be around 1744 feet in September to provide sufficient water in Kootenay Lake during that fall spawning period. 1,742 feet has been defined as a soft target for Fortis and BC Hydro, because that tends to be a minimum elevation that Kootenay Lake residents really enjoy for their recreational purposes. So we want the water to actually be a little bit higher than that for spawning kokanee. And then some of these key areas have led to Land Act Section 16 reserves, which you may or may not have heard of. So there's areas around the lake that are so critically important for the ecological values that we've actually put reserves under the Land Act to cover those areas. So there's areas of the foreshore which we absolutely do not allow applications. And they're extremely high value aquatic habitat. They're also known shoal spawning locations or burbot spawning habitat locations. Where are they? They're scattered around the lake. They tend to be relatively small in size so that we could focus on those key habitat polygons. If you want to find them, they can be found under the land ownership layer on the public mapping site, which is IMAP. It's open to everybody. What do these Land Act Section 16 reserves do? They prohibit all new tenures, including docks under the Land Act. There are areas where there are historic or untenured structures, and that is an ongoing issue we have with compliance and enforcement. So just so you can sort of see where some of these little reserves are, sort of ignore the larger polygons, but you can see little tiny dots along the west arm, and every single one of those is a Section 16 reserve. Often they are either identified spawning locations or they're associated with creek mouths, because that is critical habitat for most species that don't shoal spawn. And then it's also key habitat for the young, which tend to hang around those creek mouths. So if you have a client that wants to buy a property associated with a creek and they desperately want to build a dock, it's good to be aware of this tool and identify that that might not be something that would be allowed in the future or currently. So I just thought I would share this sort of cursory overview of some of these tools that are available.
Thank you. Crystal Williams is a GIS supervisor with the Regional District of Central Kootenay. She's a BSc graduate of the University of Calgary Geography program and has been working as a GIS professional for over 15 years. She obtained her GISP certification in 2014 and joined the Regional District in December of 2018. She's excited about the technological advances in the field that are bringing greater accessibility and education to all for spatial literacy. She works with her great team at the RD who have worked really diligently over the past few months to launch this new and improved web mapping solution. So thank you, Crystal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be with you this morning and working with these lovely ladies on some great important spatial information. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit of information on some of the geospatial services with the regional district. And then I will also be demoing our new web mapping for you. So very exciting stuff. So for those of you who don't know much about the regional district, we are a local government. We provide services to the regional districts and municipal areas that subscribe to our services. And of course, our mandate is to improve local information and knowledge and to provide applications to help many of our stakeholders. And we have lots of different stakeholders, both internal and external. So like I said, today I'm going to be demoing our new web map. Just so you know, it is not currently available. We are planning to launch it the week of May 11th to 15th. So you guys get a sneak peek look at it today. It will be available on the regional district website. So on the mapping tab, there is a web map available to you right now. That will be replaced with the new map. Just wanted to give you a couple of pieces of information before we get into the web map. When it comes to survey plans, this tends to be a piece of information a lot of realtors are looking for. Just want to let you know that we work with the BC Land Titles Authority. In the past, the regional district had sold survey plans, and survey plans give you the lot dimensioning and the area size for properties. We are not actually allowed to sell those, so we direct customers to the BC Land Titles Authority in order to purchase it. But just wanted to mention that you are able to do approximate measurements with our web map tool, and I'm going to show that to you. We also get a lot of questions about property pins and markers. So just wanted to mention that when you're using the web map, please keep in mind it is only a representative tool. So survey plans, you know, depending on their age and what's happened in the environment, things have changed over time. So some survey plans are more up to date than others. So use a bit of caution when you look at the property line work on the web map. It may be a bit out of date. And when you are finding major distortions or things like that, we really recommend you consider consulting with a land surveyor, because getting an up-to-date survey plan is really the only way to improve that information. So quickly, I just wanted to show you the web page where you can go to purchase a survey plan. The Land Titles Authority is where you want to do that. They have their own interactive web map tools that you can look up survey plans. And then I think you can order them online, and it's probably about $16 to purchase a survey plan. So it's not very expensive, but you will need to come to this resource in order to obtain that information. Just wanted to talk a little bit about property valuations. Many of you may already know this, but the property valuation is the business of BC Assessment. They do it for the entire province. We work with them to obtain that information, but we are definitely not the owner of it. We are a consumer of that information, which we show in our information on our web maps. But if you're having any issues with the information, you will need to direct them to BC Assessment for correction. So for example, when clients or property owners move or change their mailing address, that needs to be updated with BC Assessment, and BC Assessment then shares that information with us. So there can sometimes be a little bit of a time lapse with that information change, but we do partner with them, and we try to keep things as up to date as we can. And the BC Assessment website looks like this. and you can search by civic address, the folio or roll number, a plan number, or a PID. So many different ways to search for that. Oh, sorry, folks. I just had one more slide there. I wanted to talk a little bit about civic addressing. So you may find that throughout the region, there are some properties that don't have addresses. And there are sometimes addressings that just don't make sense. So that is part of our service to assign civic addressing and to increase that information and knowledge within the region. So you can reach out to us. There is a $25 fee to assign addresses, but certainly it can be very helpful in advertising a property and finding a property. And so we welcome partners to work with us and increase the amount of civic addresses in the region. Okay, without further ado, I'll move on to a little bit of a demo of our new web app. So when you first open up the web app, we have a lovely splash screen here that shows you the different ways that you can work in the map. You can use traditional navigation tools. If you're using a desktop computer, you can use the mouse roller to zoom in and out. If you know details about a property, the roll number, the PID, the address, you can just simply type them into the search bar, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. So yeah, there's many ways to work within the map. The best ways is to play with it and to see how you're comfortable about navigating and moving within the map. So one of the exciting things about our new map is that we have full base map coverage. So in the old map, we had a lot of white background and white spaces. On this new platform, we've been able to fill that in with background base mapping, and you do have some options for your base mapping. So I'll show you that shortly. So let's search. We're going to search for an address. I'm going to search for the regional district office. When you're typing and searching, less is more, and you can see that below there is a drop-down list of information. So sometimes you don't have to type in the full amount of information, just type in a few letters or numbers and then use the drop-down list to help you get where you want to go. So we've arrived at the regional district office. Another great thing about this new web map is you now don't have to go and select a tool in order to select objects within the map. If you can see where my mouse cursor is right now, if I click on the property, I can get a pop-up right away that gives me the detailed information about that property. So I can see the folio right away, the PID, the site address. We have incorporated some BC assessment information here, the actual use of this property. We have the plan number, LTO number, and legal information. And of course, at the bottom, we have the total area of the property is also available to you. Within the pop-up, you can see that there's a numbering here. So that means there is another pop-up available. If you click the arrow, it'll also tell you which jurisdiction you're within. So in this case, we're within the city of Nelson. So it's really nice. Once you get somewhere within the map, say you wanted to know something about the property next to it, it's very easy. You just click on it, and then you can get the details of that property right beside it. So we're quite excited about that, the ability to get at information much quicker than you had to in the past. So now I'm going to direct you over to our layer list here. These are all of the tools available within the map. If you hover your mouse over top, you'll see a little pop-up come up and tell you exactly what that tool does for you. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at the layer list here. It's rolled up into groupings of layers. So if I hit the arrow here, I can expand the different layers and groupings of layers that are available within this map. So some of them are not turned on right now. So we do have water services layer. If you expand that, you can see the different detailed layers within that. We have hydrants, we have valves, we have the main lines. And of course, they have to be turned on, and they have to be turned on at the upper level in order to be viewable. So if I turned off the grouping of water services, you will see the other layers now don't appear. So I need to make sure it's always turned on at the highest level. I want to direct you especially to the community planning services layer. Another new feature of the map is our zoning layer. In the old web map, we didn't have any coloration or distinction between the types of zoning layers, but in this new map, we've made them into color themes, and we've also spelled out very clearly what types of zoning layers they are. So, so it'll be much easier for users to see what's happening in the landscape and what the differences are, and to distinguish those things. So we're very pleased to have that modified in this new map. I would like to show you that we have bookmarks. So as you know, the regional district is very large and we have many areas within it. We've created a bookmark list to try and make it a little bit easier to navigate to the specific place name area that you're interested in looking in. And you can see it can bring you to that area very quickly by clicking on the different bookmark areas. Base mapping. So he's talking about having different options. So by default, you're seeing the topographic base map layer behind the scenes. We also have imagery available. Now I will warn you, this is only satellite imagery, so the resolution of it is not going to be great if you're zoomed in super close, but it still gives you some sense of where buildings and driveways and different features like that are. So it's wonderful when you can swap out and different layers and enhance the information that you're seeing. I would also like to show you the measurement tool, I think will be of interest. So I was mentioning that you may want to get some approximation of a property size. So you can do by area, or you can do by length. So, and you have some options. You can go in feet or meters, depending on what you're after. So it's nice to have options there. So what you do is it says press Control to enable the snapping. So if you press your Control, you can get to the corner of a lot, click it, and click to the other corner, and then it'll tell you on the side there what the length of that segment was. So that can be handy if you're just looking for some approximation of property sizes. Next, I'll show you the printing tool. We have some configured maps that you can make into PDF. So as you zoom around into the area and you want to make a map, you do have some options here for scaling, for your dots per resolution. I usually bump this up a little bit more. You can change the title, go Castlegar. And then you can choose different layout sizes as well. So I'm going to just go with the standard, and then you click the print button, and it's going to create a PDF map for you. I believe you have other options other than PDF. If you don't wish to use PDF, you can do a JPEG format or these different types of file formats. So the benefit of using this tool is that if you wish to have a printout of what you viewed on the screen, it gives you a nice professional looking map with a legend, a map scale, and the ability to put a title on it. If you need any assistance with the tools within the map, if you go over to this little I button and click it, we've put together a menu of common tools and different things that you might want to work with, and it gives you some instruction. So this is a way that you can learn yourself to work with the map. We, of course, will help people over the phone or give some training sessions just like we are today, but it's always nice when you can do some self-learning as well. And so we put together this little guide to help you do that. And then that's your legend as well. So I think that's all I'm going to show you for now. So again, just be patient with us while we get this map launched. It's another week or two, but we're very excited to have this map go out and share it with the rest of the world. So thank you very much for joining me. Is there any questions?
Crystal, there's one question from a realtor in the East Kootenay wondering if this same degree of mapping is available on the regional district of East Kootenay side. Are you familiar? Another realtor has answered that the mapping is available, but maybe not with this degree of functionality. Are you able to comment on that?
I have looked at their web map and they are using the same platform that we are, but how they configure their map, that's totally up to them. So I would encourage you to contact their mapping services department if you would like to know more about the specifics of their map products.
Thank you, Crystal. Juliet Craig is the program manager with the Kootenay Conservation Program. She brings a collaborative and innovative mindset to ecological projects, has a broad range of conservation experience, including invasive plant management, bat conservation, species at risk planning, and environmental education. This has helped her focus on the connections between people, the land, and important role of private landowner stewardship in conservation. Juliet has a master's in ethnobotany and is a registered professional biologist and professional agrologist. So thank you, Juliet.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to share with you the Stewardship Solutions Toolkit. And I'll talk about what it is, why it's useful to you and your clients, and how to access it. And as Kristen mentioned, I'm the program manager of the Kootenay Conservation Program. We're a network of about 80 different organizations throughout the Kootenays that focus on conservation. And our mandate is to coordinate and facilitate conservation efforts on private land and to generate the support and resources needed to maintain this effort. And many of our partner organizations have a wealth of knowledge and information and resources to help private landowners be good stewards of their property in the Kootenays. So that was the inspiration around the Stewardship Solution Toolkit. So for example, some organizations may have information on habitats for somebody who wants to do fire smarting of their property or improve wildlife habitat. There may be people moving from urban to rural areas who haven't had to deal too much with wildlife-human conflict before and are looking for resources on that. There are many people that move to and live in the Kootenays for the variety of wildlife and natural values that we have here and may want to engage in monitoring. There's people buying and selling farms and ranches, and there's specific resources available for those folks, and including some financial incentives that may be useful for them to know about. So we wanted to put all this information together, and we had originally thought of a booklet, and we realized it would quickly go out of date and it would be very vast and large. So instead, we have directed private landowners right to the source of the most up-to-date and useful information to them. It's kind of, it's a one-stop shop and like a Google of stewardship opportunities specifically for the Kootenays. And so that was the inspiration behind the Stewardship Solutions Toolkit. You can find it online by just Googling Stewardship Solutions Toolkit or going to this specific link. And it's all divided into the regions of the Kootenays. So no matter where you're a realtor working in the Kootenays, there is information specific to your region. So because I'm sitting in Nelson, I'm gonna use the example of the west arm of Kootenay Lake. My internet's been a little slow, so I'm just doing it through screenshots today. But I do encourage you to go online after the webinar, find your area and see what resources are available in your specific region. So in the Kootenay Lake West Arm, for example, there's information about fire smarting your property, which not only protects the property of a landowner, but also helps maintain a healthy forest ecosystem to have these forests thinned. The BC Wildlife Federation has information and resources to build or create a wetland on your property. And we've already heard from the Kootenay Lake Partnership about the Shorelines guidance document that they offer. The Kootenay and Boundary Farm Advisors Program has a wealth of information, not only how to be a good steward of your farmland, but also how to strengthen your farm business. The Environmental Farm Plan Program works confidentially with farmers to create an environmental plan for their farm. And then those farmers can access up to $80,000 to carry out those activities. Living Lakes Canada has a well monitoring program, so people can start monitoring well water in the face of climate change. In the west arm of Kootenay Lake, there's also the Grizzly Bear Coexistence Solutions project, where Julian will come to a property and explain and demonstrate how to install and maintain electric fencing to protect livestock and fruit trees, and it's also provide 50% of the cost back to landowners. WildSafe BC has a whole wealth of information about reducing and preventing human-wildlife conflict. The Kootenay Community Bat Project will visit property owners who have bats living in the buildings and provide information on how to safely evict bats from the property, or if the bats are maintained there, how to participate in the annual bat count to monitor for bat populations. There's a lot of other monitoring citizen science programs like Great Blue Herons, and if people have a rookery on their property or near their property, they can monitor for these birds. There's an osprey monitoring program as well around Kootenay Lake through the Friends of Kootenay Lake. And there's a barn swallow monitoring, bank swallow monitoring program as well that people may want to get engaged in. The Kootenay Natives Plant Society has a Camas Watch program, so people can participate in monitoring this culturally significant plant that's found on Marsden Face and the Castlegarn Trail areas. And the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society has a whole variety of information and resources available for people who are trying to control noxious weeds or invasive plants on their property, and Lori will be talking about that next. There's opportunities for landowners to donate ecologically significant lands to land trusts like the Nature Conservancy of Canada or the Nature Trust of BC. And there's also tax incentives for people who do that through the Federal Eco Gifts program. So this is just a smattering of some of the organizations and resources available in that particular region. And as I mentioned, you can go to your region either by Googling Stewardship Solutions Toolkit or going straight to this website link. And we have some rack cards that can help people find this website link. And we're happy to provide them to your office, so you have them in your office or in your vehicles or to provide in your client packages. So when the links go out after the webinar, there will be one to sign up and request some of these materials for your office. So I'm going to show you also how to access it online as well. You hover over the different area that you're living in, or what we're calling a conservation neighborhood, and then you click on the one that you're interested in. So again, I'll use the west arm of Kootenay Lake as an example. And then a checkerboard shows up on the website that has a list of all the different resources available in that area or programs. So you can find one that you're interested in, such as the grizzly bear coexistence solutions, and click the Read More button. And it will give a brief description about that program, the contact information for the person who's running it. And in this case, she doesn't have a website, so otherwise it's quite hard to find. So you can do it through Facebook or contact her directly. And she's also got a video uploaded on how to electric fence for bears. So if we want to go to another one, for example, we could click on constructing a wetland on your property. And so the contact information for the correct person will show up as well. And also, sometimes there'll be additional resources listed below. So in this example, this is a brochure specifically for the Kootenays that isn't found on their provincial website. So it's in a sort of a one-stop shop to access those resources. If you'd like to see a full list of all the resources for your region, you can go to the Download PDF Handout button. And when you click on that, you'll get a downloadable PDF format document. And we also have some of these printed for every single region in the Kootenays. So if you're keen to provide these to your clients or to have one for yourself, again, you can request some through that link that will be sent to you. So I hope that's given you some information on the Stewardship Solutions Toolkit and how to find it and why it's useful to your clients, so that they'll not only be happy with getting the new keys to their property, but also getting some stewardship solutions information.
Thank you so much, Juliet. And our last presenter today is Lori Carr, Development Coordinator with the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, or also known as CICUS. Lori has a Master's of Science and brings 2 years of art and design studies, as well as 12 years experience in plant community, forestry, commodity markets, and population ecology research. After 5 years as the CICUS board president, Lori manages program development, which includes partnership, building, fundraising, board development, strategic planning, field work, and graphic design.
Hello, and thank you for having me today. I am Lori Carr from the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, and I am presenting for the Kootenay Lake Partnership and the Kootenay Association of Realtors today. I will be delving into invasive species and their impacts on real estate transactions. So the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, or CICUS for short, is a nonprofit started in 2005. Our mission is protecting our ecosystems and communities by preventing and reducing the harmful impacts of invasive species. Our work is very collaborative, and we do a lot of coordinating with various agencies and groups. We are interested in involving all community members, including real estate professionals, because this work is multi-jurisdictional. It does involve everyone, which makes this a very fascinating and fun issue, if I may say so myself. Invasive species, what are they exactly? They are organisms that cause ecological or economic harm in a new environment where they are not native, and this is important, that they are outside of their natural range. A lot of our plant species especially come from Eurasia. They come over with shipping, airplanes, tourism, often transplanted, intentionally for gardening or for medicinal purposes, agricultural purposes. Some common traits: they are initially and primarily dispersed by humans. This is very important when we look at trying to prevent the dispersal of invasive species. So there are a lot of behavior change programs, clean, drain, dry, I will talk about a little bit more. Another trait that is really important is the exponential growth, and we should be familiar with this graph from coronavirus news. And this shows a growth that at first doesn't seem like there's a lot of species, but if you're looking at, say, doubling a population every so once in a while, at first, there's not a lot, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, not a lot, but then all of a sudden you get it into higher numbers, and the numbers start doubling at quite a rapid rate. And then at that point, it becomes very hard to eradicate that species and to control it. So we see exponential growth because of a high fecundity for most species that are invasive. They have a lot of seed production, or they can reproduce very easily, or they have a lot of babies' eggs. This allows them to outcompete our native species. They also lack predator control in a new environment, and this is why it's important that they are outside of their natural range. The third really important trait of an invasive species, which distinguishes it from, say, a naturalized species that has also come from outside of its range, is that these species cause harm. So invasive species are one of the greatest threats to biodiversity globally. They also cost an enormous amount of money to control, manage, eradicate, and they do cause a lot of damage, say, to agricultural crops, infrastructure. And so we are very concerned about these species for these reasons. There are 97 known invasive species in the central Kootenay region, including the lovely American bullfrog, which is coming up from the States. You probably recognize species such as common tansy or knapweed. They're quite widespread. And knotweed, which we will be talking about a little bit more. So because this presentation was about shoreline properties, some invasive aquatic species of Kootenay Lake that are here are Eurasian milfoil and the curly-leaf pondweed. You might be familiar with milfoil. Kootenay Lake has quite a huge infestation. Champion Lakes, there are removal programs for these because they impact swimming and recreation so much. And the tourism industry, of course. Risk of incursion are flowering rush, which is unfortunately still sold, so be careful of this one. Don't plant it. Parrot feather, zebra, and quagga mussels, which you may have seen the inspection stations for watercraft. For these ones along the highway, we do not have them in BC, and we do not want them in BC. So these are species that might affect your property value if you have a shoreline property. Clean, drain, dry, as I said, is aimed at making sure that watercraft do not transport invasive species such as whirling disease or any of the aquatic plants that I just mentioned, or the zebra quagga mussels. And this map on the right is just to show you the distribution and what we are dealing with. They're quite heavily infested on the east coast, and they are moving west, and we are trying to stop them, obviously, from getting into our lakes and impacting our infrastructure, like our hydro dams and our swimming and fishing, etc., our fish populations. Another species that you will more than likely come across if you're dealing with private properties is knotweed. It's very widespread. This particular species is of concern because it can impact infrastructure because of its extensive rhizome or root network. It's quite strong, so where you wouldn't want a tree root, you would not want a knotweed root because it can get into the cracks in infrastructure and break your infrastructure, your foundation, get into septic tanks, etc. However, the big difference between this species and a tree species is that you can cut down a tree and it will die, but you cannot cut down knotweed because it only increases its spread. It's a very voracious plant. It can reproduce from fragments of roots or stems. So you basically do not want to disturb this plant. The only way of getting rid of it successfully is with herbicide control, and that does require a contractor and does cost quite a bit to get rid of this. It does take 3 to 5 years. It does spread quite voraciously. We get a lot of calls from property owners who have just bought a house and are just stunned that they are now dealing with this particular plant. And we also get calls from people looking to sell property or people that are looking at buying property and want to know the implications of buying a property with knotweed on it. So these next slides I have taken from the Invasive Species Council of BC online tool. I do highly suggest everyone go check it out. It's a short 30-minute webinar and has a lot of great information. So selling infested property. So the sale and purchase of private property infested with invasive species can quickly become complex, placing the sale at risk, especially if somebody knows their stuff and there's an extensive patch of knotweed. It is quite phenomenal what it takes to get rid of knotweed. So there are legal complications that could occur, and so it is advised to use the property disclosure statement with an infested property. Also, if you are involved in land development, be very aware of the distribution and movement of soil. Plant seed can remain viable for decades, so you don't want to be moving infested soil, and especially knotweed, you can dispose of it. That does require a cost to dispose of infested soil, so just be aware of that. Also prevent disturbance of an area mean, if you have disturbed it, obviously, then you should restore it, reseed the area to minimize the incursions of new invasive species. And there are some legislation pieces that you should be aware of. That is the BC Weed Control Act, which means that property owners are legally responsible for controlling and removing invasive plants on their properties. And there is a schedule that lists the species that property owners are legally required to deal with. I do have to say there isn't a huge amount of enforcement of this Weed Control Act in our area, but we are working to change that. So hopefully there will be. Also be aware of official community plans or land use bylaws that might reference invasive species, such as unsightly premises or landscaping bylaws. And also be aware if there's a covenant on the land, because they might require the control of invasive species. So in order to get more information, please visit our website. We have a ton of information on there. We have the list of the regional priority species in our area. Also, there is the Invasive Species Council of BC online tool that I was referencing. This is a great resource, as well as they have a toolkit, which has a huge amount of information on it if you want to get more information. Also, the BC Ministry of the Environment does have best management practices, and if you are develop with care, might be of interest to you. So in summary, in order to help your clients, inform them about the provincial and local legislation that applies to them, and if you are involved in a real estate transaction, do discuss the property disclosure statement, and connect any property owners with the invasive species organization in their area. And there are 14 across the province, sister organizations. CICUS is more than happy to receive calls from the public. So just a quick shout out to our funders, especially the Columbia Basin Trust. And please do visit our website at cicus.ca. And we are now going to turn to questions. Thank you very much for having me today.
Well, I've just got one comment here for you, Lori. The highways have been dragging the knotweed along ditches when they are mowing, helping it spread. And it seems like they're not mowing it when they see it. Did you want to comment on that?
Yes, so I don't know if you have seen these bright yellow no-mow signs, which we have in our region. And that we place on either side of a patch of knotweed so that the mowers aren't supposed to lift their blade and they're not supposed to mow that. So we do have that program running. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that covers it. And were there any more questions for Lori before we move into a general Q&A for all the panelists? Okay, it doesn't look like it, but there is a question left over from, I believe it was Kristen's presentation at the start. Kristen, are there any issues with existing properties rebuilding something that is already there but in disrepair? And that's
sure. Is that I'm going to assume that's specifically associated with the section 16s. Definitely there are. We have historic structures, but we don't want to allow structures at all within the section 16 areas. So areas that have had tenures in the past, they'll probably just, the ideal situation is that they will just eventually expire.
Were there any other questions? Oh, one's just coming in here, just a moment. The comment is, I was thinking docks and such.
Yes, so a dock that requires a tenure within the section 16. Anything else would simply follow the shoreline guidance document. And then if you look at the table, there are docks in there. So just depending on what segment you're in and what the aquatic habitat value is, it sort of goes through what type of information you want to collect before issuing or applying for your tenure.
Many thanks to our presenters, Kristen, Crystal, Juliet, and Lori, for sharing their knowledge today. And so we hope you found today valuable, and thank you very much for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.